So welcome everyone to our next in the video series in the DQ 40 years campaign, where we look at the last 40 years of IIT, but mainly we look to the future. We look to India's mission 2047. And this time we have no one better to discuss the entire education, skills, and the future of talent in India than a stalwart in the form of Rajendra S Pawar, chairman and co-founder of the NIIT Group. Welcome, Mr. Pawar. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Sunil.
Yeah.
Pleasure to be here on this chat with you.
Yeah. So, interestingly, we are looking at 40 years of data quest. And in one way, what you call of technical education or technical skills began around 40 years ago. Because till the 50s and 60s, we just had engineering colleges, which gave degrees. But I think the formation of NIIT changed that. And I think if you look, NIIT was formed at the right time. And especially the first 20 years of NIIT was a roller coaster ride. Because immediately we had the 1984 National Computer Policy, 1986 National Software Policy, the PC revolution, the DTP revolution, liberalization, the commercial internet, Y2K crisis. I mean, I can only imagine the changes that took place in the 80s and 90s. So it would be great if you could live us through that happening era.
Thanks, Sunil. You covered a lot in describing these 2 decades, and indeed they were fantastic decades. And when we launched NIIT December 81 at the Computer Society Convention in Chennai, we talked of NIIT as the idea whose time had come. There's an old saying, an idea whose time has come. Nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. So we felt that NIIT was being born at a time which was a very important time in the history of computers and IT. It was the genesis, more or less. The previous decade, we'd seen some of the companies set up computer manufacturing facilities, and I was involved in one of them. And it had become very clear to us, end of the 70s, that while computers would be manufactured in India, the constraint that would hold back the utilization was going to be people. And therefore, the mission which NIIT had for itself was bringing people and computers together successfully. So the 80s, the period of the first decade of NIIT was full of action, full of ideas, full of innovation, extensive innovation, I would say. Innovation in all forms. We started using technology, multimedia education. We actually made it a point to be clear to ourselves and to the marketplace that we were involved in the business of learning, not in the business of teaching. We recognized that if there's no talent available, if there's no skills available in IT, and we have to create skills, we have no option but to look for innovation as a method, because if you don't have talent, how do you build more talent? So the role of technology was central. But more central than that was the role of the science of learning, of pedagogy. So we introduced with a big bang, and we talked of the first real initiative of multimedia in education. We launched our programs. There was a very massive demand for computer training programs. We had to respond with a method. And so we created for the first time in education the model of franchising, of a network, which by the end of the 90s was 2,000 centers strong in about 40 countries. So the genesis of this explosion was basically fueled by the coming of the IT revolution. And we played our role in doing innovation across the board in the 80s on how to build content, how to deliver content, how to be completely focused on the learner, and life revolved around the learner. And so the 80s was a period of spreading ourselves. And the 90s, of course, when liberalization happened, 2 other great forces were happening along with that. And Sunil, you referred to that, the Y2K concern, but along with that, the revolution, the .com, the beginnings of .com, the coming of internet. And it was a period when we, as part of our daily habit of trying new things, built the first virtual university on the internet in 96, Net Varsity, a little ahead of its time because the internet, as you know, was very slow that time. But we have been pushing the innovation, pushing the whole space because talent was really what was driving industry at that time. And the 90s was a period for our Indian IT industry, the services industry was a boom period. And that's the time when from NIIT we launched, in fact, in 1991, the GNIIT Group, which at its peak was the world's largest industry academia linkage, 25,000 interns in 8,000 companies, completing the one-year internship, which was part of the program from GNIIT. So that became really the talent that drove a large part of the sector's growth. And so when we came to the end of the 90s, we were still in a situation where there was an acute shortage of engineering seats. There were only 90,000 seats in 1999. And NIIT was really filling the gap and making, as we said, making ordinary graduates into extraordinary professionals for the IT sector. And many of the GNIITs of that decade went on to become CTOs and CIOs and CEOs, and now, of course, in many startups. So those 2 decades was a very, very fascinating roller coaster ride, where from one company that was NIIT, formed in December of 1981, we spawned a whole IT training industry as a sector, which was tracked, which had dozens of companies that came in. And of course, many went out. But I think that period created a huge alternative. We talked of ourselves as the alternatives for young people for engineering and medicine, and taking graduates from all disciplines. We proved that you did not have to be a mathematician to be very good in programming. We had students from all streams. And then, along with many of our competitors, we created a very highly regarded, respected, tracked industry. So that was the first 2 decades.
So that's quite interesting. So I think NIIT and India, you laid all the building blocks of whatever technical education was required. But again, it ended with another roller coaster, Y2K. So Y2K also set the pace. Like, for example, in 80-81, the birth of IT set a certain pace. But the Y2K set another pace. So if you look at the next 20 years, as I remember, there was an NIIT in every corner where I looked. Then there was a mushrooming of engineering colleges, the startup industry. So the next 20 years, I would say, were equally exciting, but totally different. So maybe if you can give a perspective of that also.
See, before we get on to the year 2000,
Sure.
.com, and then the .com bust and everything that happened.
Yeah.
In the 90s, we had also started introducing IT into schools because we realized that it's too late to start educating people when they come to college about IT. So in 1999 to 1991, we had started dabbling and doing research in how to teach in the classes. In 1999, we actually launched a program, which was to take IT into schools. And you may recall that we had also done a very good experiment at that time to say, what about kids who are not even in schools? So the hole-in-the-wall experiment, which was done by an R&D center, became famous and is globally famous now, of how to reach the unreached, how to take connected devices into slums and villages and let children learn on their own. So that was also pedagogical research, which was getting us ready for the next few decades. But 1999, I did mention that we had about 90,000 seats in engineering. The liberalization of engineering education in India is a very important phenomenon. We miss that often. But within the next decade, we had more than 15x increase in engineering seats in this country. So from a situation where people had to pay capitation fee to go into engineering colleges, by the end of this third decade, that's 2010, we had reached a point where we were beginning to get a surplus of seats. And it became, engineering college education became in the reach of everybody. But we discovered at that time that NIIT had to change its whole role, that even engineering college students found that they were not remaining up to date with IT. So we had to respond to that by we had programs called engineers. How do you give an edge to an engineer? Because IT companies were wanting people by the hundreds of thousands, and engineers were not equipped yet. So we had a role to prepare, more disciplined engineers or trained in all disciplines to get ready for the IT sector. But this is also a time when the next big revolution had started, which was the banking revolution. And in 2006, I remember the time when Mr. Kamath, who was then heading ICICI, had asked NIIT to respond to the talent challenge which he saw for the banking sector. And we made a joint venture with ICICI called the Institute of Finance, Banking and Insurance, which in that period, 2007 onward, we started. More than 2 lakh people have been trained, of which, by the way, about 40,000 drove the whole retail banking revolution in ICICI. Now we have about a dozen banks for whom we do training at all levels, from entry level, now to also the whole relationship management, the whole business development, service excellence level, and to all aspects of banking and insurance. So the second big wave of talent that was needed to drive that sector is also something that we pioneered in 2006 and 2007. And that actually took us beyond the domain of just IT. But remember, during this time, the other thing which was happening was that as we came into the late part of the second decade, towards 2020, everything was becoming technology-based. So X-tech, as we call it, commerce tech, agri-tech, those words are becoming important, more prominent now, but toward the end of the last decade, that was becoming clear. So the whole digital India idea was very strong, and it brought to the minds of all people that there is tech everywhere. And therefore, the transition of the talent building process, which was in the first phase for us about IT, then about banking, is now actually becoming pervasive. So these 2 decades saw that talent transformation happen. That a large number of engineers being available to fuel more and more sectors, but a large part going to IT. Then the banking phenomena of talent for the banking sector. And now, of course, it's all pervasive. So we need tech everywhere.
So actually that,
last 2 decades.
Yeah. So I think in one way, it's been a fascinating journey. If you look from 81 to 2019, you talked about it. It was first engineering education, technical education, skills, talents. And if you see, it has been slowly spreading everywhere. First, only a certain set of professionals needed it. It started spreading everywhere. But I feel that once the pandemic came, all that went into acceleration. So before we look at the effects and the future, if you can just go us through 2019 to 2023, what changes took place in NIIT, what changes took place in India, and how we all evolved. So that would be quite interesting.
Well, this period that you talk of has perhaps been the most fascinating period in terms of change. Yeah. Not just the quantum of change, but the vast range of things which have happened. And with COVID at the center of everything. COVID actually created, of course, a lot of distress for all of us, the world at large. But COVID also became a point of significant pivoting and transformation, sector by sector by sector. So look at education. It was impossible during COVID time for anyone to go to the classroom. And we had been seeing that in learning, the space of learning prior to COVID, there were many people who were taken on to online living life online, but there were many who were not. I think that one thing that COVID did was it forced every human being to recognize that anything which had to be done had to be done digitally. And for education, that was serious because, in my view, education is as much about collaborating with peers in a classroom as it is about learning from content. But COVID forced us all to push technology to a limit where we had no option but to learn online. Now, in my view, now that COVID is behind us, something which I had repeatedly said even with the onset of COVID was that online learning is the only alternative, but it's not a good alternative. At that time, people were not willing to listen, but now you're seeing report after report saying that it has been a lost period of learning, particularly for school children who need the most support and collaborative. Even for college-going students, it's been lost period in many ways because the socialization that happens to all of us as we are adolescents, that process of collaborating, learning, building teamwork, communicating, that part could not fully be done. We could transfer content, but that's a small part of learning. But what COVID did do was it forced all of us, everyone, and forced governments, for example, to make access, to lower the costs. It provided an opportunity for the telecom sector to expand at such a pace that they could give away things almost for free. Now, this phenomena and this period, I think, has been transformational because everything had to be tech-based because we had no option. So resistance to change was not an issue. I think all of us transformed to do buying and traveling and everything online. And learning online was one of the things that happened. And we came out, I would say we've come out much more knowledgeable and experienced of how to do the learning component online, because only a certain component can be done. And the rest has to be done through blended forms or hybrid forms. And for a company like ours, which was dealing with technology from 82 itself and pushing the limits, COVID was a great time because it let us express many of our intentions of the past, which assumed technology was around. You remember NetVarsity in 1996. We could do many, many more things at a global level using technology, pushing technology at that time, but realizing that post-COVID, we'll have to make a new way to learn, which takes the best out of learning, but that extent only which is possible. And therefore, the new way to learn is what we have been working on, embarking on during this period of change and making a lot of new plans for this period.
So again, before I go further, I'd like to know, because, like when online education came, in certain aspects it was great, but I mean, it was really bad for the school children. They couldn't. But you talked of blended education, hybrid education. Do you think we have cracked the blended and hybrid model, and that will work in the years to come?
We haven't cracked it, but
Okay.
we've understood
Okay.
the challenges. So, in fact, quite early when online started and everybody thought that was a solution, I was having extensive discussions with educators at all levels. I'm involved in the board of my school where I studied, I'm on the board of the IIT, and on many boards. And therefore, I had a very good vantage point of what students and teachers were going through. And I had put my thought together in something which I created a title after a lot of consideration, which was Frustrated Students and Exhausted Teachers. To me, that was the sum and substance of the first year and a half of online, because it had just caught us by surprise. So everybody learned a lot, and we pushed our learnings of the last 4 decades to work. And we found that designing the hybrid is a non-trivial problem. Even today, it is non-trivial. Even today, I find many people pushing technology in the wrong spaces where mentoring is required or where collaboration is required. But let's say this, that everybody has been through that rough patch and hopefully learned many things. But I can say that for those of us who were dabbling with technology earlier, even at a university which we created, the NIIT University is a not-for-profit in 2009, from day one, we were completely technology dependent. So for example, our interviewing process from 2009 at NU, the final interviews are all done virtually. You could be living anywhere. So it was difficult in 2009 to have students from Manipur coming to a data center and doing, but now everybody does it at home. But all the way to delivering education, which we did in the virtual space. And another thing which we haven't talked about much, but is the foundation that we set up in 2004. And that was coming on the heels of the scholarship program which we used to run right from 1991. We called it the Bhavishyoti Scholarship Scheme for all those who couldn't afford our learning. So 2004, then we set up a foundation which deals with students who haven't gone to college, who can't afford. And whatever we had learned with the hole in the wall and those kind of experiments, we put that to use. And we have a very large scale, that's another not-for-profit, the NIIT Foundation, and has dealt with a few million learners and tens of thousands being placed, not in IT, some in IT as well, but their first job where some digital literacy from some capability of how to express, how to communicate, how to work as a team, whatever we had learned as we were building well-rounded professionals, we put that in the foundation as well. And because of digital, we can do an outreach. They have something like 2,000 locations that they're working. So from the foundation, which is a not-profit, to NIIT Limited, and now we have demerged to NIIT Learning System, which deals with the Fortune 1,000 companies for their learning outsourcing, all the way to universities. We had the good fortune to try out and to experiment and to innovate for all categories of learners, for all segments of learners, for all geographies of the world. So that experience, I think, is what's important to put out to play as we get ready for the next couple of decades, because now the word talent has become key. And we also repurposed our mission. So you remember I talked about mission was bringing people and computers together. That had to be expanded when fintech happened. But now, as we go forward, our mission is helping people realize their true potential. Helping people realize their true potential about learning, enabling learning for all categories. But the vision is that we want to be the talent builders of the nation. That's what we see as our new vision. And therefore, broad-basing the areas in which we operate and using the right models of delivering learning to all learners. I think that's what is our direction going forward.
So again, I think we have we have covered 40 years and we have also scraped at the future. So maybe I'd like to maybe expand a bit on, India's mission 2047, because for the first time, it's possible that, we could be a technological and economic superpower by 2047. And you have one of the big things will be skills and talent in that. So right now it is not enough. Education is not enough. It is a lifelong skilling, reskilling and upskilling process. And also I find fascinating that NIIT also has been doing something like that for the last 40 years. And you have been getting more and more into every field and every age. So maybe from the next 20 years, 25 years, what do you say to the citizens who we are living in a digital world, and how will they scale, reskill and upskill themselves, and maybe more about where NIIT sees itself in 2047, in the talent 2047 era?
Well, considering the tumultuous 3 years, trying to predict for the next 25
I
years,
know it's
tricky,
the toughest.
but nonetheless, I think some things are clear to me. First of all, people are concerned about, digital, the demographic dividend, we have a risk. I firmly believe that, when we say it's India's time, it's because the bulge is huge. We have a very large number of young people. We're the youngest country by age of this country, of this size. And this is increasing, while many, many, many other large countries are seeing a dip. We have become, as you know, the world's largest population. So it's not a liability, it's a huge asset. Because what is the population? The population is a set of minds. And from 1996, I started saying that the 21st century is India's century because it's the century of the mind. And whoever has the most minds will rule. Not rule in a negative way, but will be the most meaningful and relevant part of society. Now, this large number of people, over 10 million getting added every year, have to be given an environment to learn. We have to create a setting where they learn. So to me, the difference between education, skill, and talent is the talent is what all of us are born with, right? Education is what we force into people. Skills is what we learn when we're doing something with our hands. And learning is really the emphasis that we have to have, how to create an environment where people learn. So let's see what's the environment we have moved into. We moved into a connected environment. We moved into a digital environment. So that's a given. So we don't have to use digital anymore. It's commonplace. Everybody has a device in their hand, rich or poor. And we're reaching the nooks and crannies. So let's take digital as a given. Speeds are going up. 5G will come. Satellites all over the place. Images all over the place. So digital is a given. There will be a level playing field. That will be a level playing field. So the question now is, what can we do to make sure there's a huge demographic bulge that we have, we help every one of them realize their true potential. So therefore, it's about enabling people to learn. It's about creating opportunities for people to learn. And so what we see as the responsibility for NIIT and the likes of us is to make it possible for people at every age in their life to get access to opportunities to learn in all fields. So let's see the fields which are emerging. For India, as I said, the IT phenomena happened in the 90s with liberalization. We were well poised for it. Then we are seeing that happen in other areas. And now we are seeing that India moving also to become the factory of the world. We are at the early stages of it. So manufacturing. But by the way, manufacturing is very technology-based. Manufacturing is very software-based. So the tech part of it, the digital part of it is a given. Look at supply chain. The world went through torture because of the supply chain getting disrupted during COVID. So India is trying to build and find a way to occupy that space with digital being the foundation for logistics, for example, for supply chain. And look at engineering R&D, rather than just IT of the old time. Engineering R&D is also growing, and that's again about talent. It's again technology-based. So everything we look at, we talk of agri-tech, we talk of med-tech. So everything is on a foundation of technology. Everything at the base as digital, and learners will have to learn for the rest of their life. That's a great news, because unlike our days where we studied a discipline, it lasted us a lifetime because the longevity of life was 50 years not too long ago. Now it's going to 70 and pushing beyond. And people will work up to the age of 70 and 80 and 90 as we go into the next 25 years. So everybody will have to relearn, and that's a great thing. People already, we are beginning to see youngsters moving from one area to a completely unrelated area. So they're relearning. And it's not about going back to college alone. So it's about learning. It's about opportunities to learn. Then we are seeing the second big trend along with this pervasive digitization is the role of AI. And there's much more noise because of ChatGPT, though AI is not new. And many of us have been around to see at least 3 waves of AI which came and went. Some very unsuccessful, but now are getting more successful because we have connected devices and we have unlimited computing, unlimited memory. So those constraints have gone, and therefore the ability of people, of humans, to extend the mental capability by taking these new capabilities of connectivity and computing and storage, it is the next big thing, which to me is a productivity multiplier. So AI, generative AI, which people are worried about, I think we should embrace it. It is just another very powerful productivity tool. Those who don't learn it will become irrelevant. That's happened all through. Those who were not willing to give up the horse and get onto a motor got left behind. And it's happened at every new wave of technology. So AI, generative AI, will help each of us to be more productive. That's the big thing. So if we have this huge bulge in talent, we provide opportunities to learn across sectors, across spaces. And so everything tech, commerce tech, edtech, in all spaces, provide opportunities to learn and then help people realize that they can amplify their intellect. Much like, if you remember, when the automobile came, it really removed a limitation of how fast our legs can move us. Aeroplane came, they removed the limitation of how far an automobile. Then we had the telephone. What did that do? It removed the limitation of how far I can hear. TV, it removed the limitation of how far I can see. But all these limitations in these revolutions were dealing with the physical parts of the system. AI and computers are dealing with this device here, the human brain. And I don't want to say mind, I distinguish between the two. Because the brain is getting replicated in AI. But the human mind, which is all beyond, we talk of consciousness, talk talk of creativity, we talk of emotion. Those are spaces which are still far away. And humans have to actually leverage those human capabilities and delegate more and more of the mechanical work of the brain to AI. And I think young mind that India has, we have to shape them. We have to put challenges in front of them in all spheres of their life so they can embrace these new technologies that are coming to increase the productivity of the human brain and start then using the human mind to its fullest potential. So when I talk of helping people realize their true potential, that's the direction it is in which we see things moving as we go forward.
So, Anya, I think that was pretty exhaustive and we dug deep. That is also, you talked about the future and AI. That's a good place to end. But before we go, I'd like one bird's eye view from you. What is your, because you are uniquely placed to look at the next 25 years. Do you have any message for the industry or government? Are you optimistic? So maybe just your final thoughts
So
before.
first of all, I'm highly optimistic. I mean,
Okay.
there's no question about that. And one of the big areas of optimism is that we have this huge young generation which is very hungry to learn. Huge bulge that's coming. And bulges have happened in other countries, and we've seen them reap the benefits of the dividend. We are fully ready for it. We are a large functioning democracy. We are a country which is becoming far more knowledgeable about its true strengths and its personal and its own identity. We're touching base with our own hearts and our minds to know what we are capable of. We're getting more self-confident. Our identity is becoming clearer to us. The world is beginning to recognize it takes very little to look around and see that in these difficult times, how people are beginning to look at India. So to me, I think there's absolutely no reason for us to close our eyes to this extreme opportunity and optimism in front of us. I want to belabor that point, irrespective of whatever people worry about many things happening, but the force of change and the positive opportunities for us. That's one. Second is, I think we have to seize this opportunity. And that's obviously all players have to do that. All of society, all of government, all of the academic world, all of industry, and the non-government organizations the social organizations which have to play an increasing role to have societal balance as well. And it's actually refreshing to see that with the startup phenomena, the number of startups, young people who are so socially sensitive and socially aware, they're dealing with social problems of sustainability, of energy, of water, of handicrafts, of reviving the arts. So we see enormous recognition, I think I can say in India, of the potential that lies at every nook and cranny, at every layer of our society. We have so much to offer to the world. And coming with this dividend of demographic dividend and the fact that there's reform in education that's happening. So I think there's an opportunity for young people to seize. They should take this opportunity in their hand. They should try new things. They should learn. They shouldn't wait for teaching to happen, what I would say. And even the new policy on education is creating space for liberalization. So all told, Sunil, I am extremely optimistic. I think it's a great time to be a young person in this country, but also the great time to be an old person. So much to do.
Yeah. So anyway, I'd like to thank, for me, it was like a time travel journey from 1981, 82 to 2047. So where we looked at the past and the future. And I like your optimism, and I'm going forward. I'm going to go ahead with your optimism. And I'm really looking forward to 2047. It's going to be an exciting journey.
And thanks so much, Sunil.